Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Our guest today is Rick Saez. Rick is an adventurer, author, accomplished photographer, and podcaster, and he is the host of the Outdoor Biz podcast. Rick joined us back in 2021 to chat about his work, and I was really excited to bring him back on because he just returned from Ireland, where he accompanied a group of journalists on a press trip sponsored by Tourism Ireland and Stellar. So, Rick, so glad to have you back on the podcast in this early Friday morning.
Yeah, thanks. A second time visitor. That's exciting.
I don't do this for everybody, but you're a good guy and trying to help you out a little bit. But
I appreciate it.
You don't need any help from me.
I appreciate it. It's always fun.
Yeah, definitely. And I just thought it'd be kind of cool to get you back on so you can share with our audience what you've been up to. And I really want to hear more about this trip to this press junket to Ireland, because I'm like, man, I got to do something like that. So, but before we jump in, just for our listeners, if they're a first-time listener, hopefully they'll go back to the first episode we did, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But give a little backstory about who is Rick Saez. How'd you get into this world of podcasting?
Yeah, so as you've heard the story, I kind of stumbled into podcasting. I've been in the outdoor industry space since I grew up. I mean, one of the things I realized early on in college, I was going to go to college to either study architecture or civil engineering. And, the both programs were impacted. So I had to take a bunch of other classes and wasn't digging it, flunked out, and went to a JC and took a wildlife law enforcement class and an environmental biology class. And both of those classes were outdoor focused. Both of them had outdoor outings. The biology class, the instructor had some slides from back when Glen Canyon had not been dammed yet. It was still running free. Beautiful space. And I'd always been an outdoor guy. My grandfather was a hunter, and we always played outside and hiked outside and camped. So that was just like, wow, this is cool. And so I'm thumbing through the catalog back at the university, and I saw outdoor recreation and thought, boom, that's it. That's my next degree. So canned all the plans for architecture and civil engineering, to the dismay of my family probably, but got 2 degrees in outdoor recreation, and immediately was fortunate enough to teach at an outdoor camp and work at an outdoor retail shop on the weekends, and then got into river guiding in the summers. And it just sealed the deal. And the river guiding thing connected me to the outdoor industry world, where reps buy and sell products. And I was being a sales manager and a product manager and that so forth for a lot of years, over 20 years in the outdoor space. It's been just great. And then got laid off at 50 some odd years old from a brand that was been a lot of bought and sold kind of things going on with venture capital firms or whatnot. And they were being sold. And I was caught up in the last round of layoffs and thought, geez, man, I'm over 50. We all knew this was coming. So our resumes were floating out and about, wasn't getting any action on mine. I thought, I might be done. What the hell am I going to do? And I had a 45-minute one-way commute to this job. So I had a lot of time to listen to podcasts. And that's when I discovered podcasting. And I was listening to the Tim Ferriss show and Pat Flynn and John Lee Dumas. All those guys were just hitting their heyday. Podcasting was just becoming a thing. And the Tim Ferriss show, he's just an interesting guy. He's got a lot of interesting things that he's into. He's into a lot of different things like I am. And I thought I could just kind of copy what Tim does. I could just interview all the people I have connected with in the outdoor adventure travel space, and it could be a pretty interesting show. So I did some research, figured out how to do it. I had no experience with audio, a lot of experience with photography, but I had some equipment. And one of the Tim's best advice, I give people this advice all the time, is don't go out and buy a bunch of stuff. Just use what you have, test drive it, do a couple things, see if you like it, because you might not like it.
Right.
I love it, and started the podcast, and here we are. I just dropped episode 350 this week. So it's been fantastic.
That is fantastic. 350. And to your point of, you had the early guys, the folks that started out in the world of podcasting, Ferriss, Pat Flynn, et cetera. And I get a lot of chatter. I read a lot of chatter, like on the Facebook group, because you and I have different platforms that we use for our podcast. But there's always this one question, like, how do I start a podcast? And I want to do it. There's all the equipment and And I'm like, look, if you want to start a podcast, we could start right now.
Yep.
And I think, and then you start to learning about what should I do next? What's next? What's the next best move? And I love that. And from your perspective, if you had somebody come up to you today and they said, Rick, I heard your podcast. I love it. I really want to do it. How would you share with them about the ease or some of the things they need to think about starting a podcast?
Well, it's I have this 10 simple steps document that I send out to beginning people I start working with on my coaching program. And it is really simple. I mean, I tell everybody the first few episodes that I did, I had a microphone, but I used my earbud headset, plugged it into the computer. The mic was plugged into the computer and just did it all that way. So you really don't need a lot of equipment. And the second thing is, I think you really have to focus on, if you just want to start it just to have fun with it and play around with it, then it's not as important as picking a good topic and all that. But if you really think it's something that you want to get into, then you really need to focus on what value do you bring to the table? What are your experiences? What is your expertise? Because we all love to learn from one another. And that's why I focused on the outdoor biz, because I think everybody can be more successful if they learn from those of us that came before. So those of us that have been in the industry for a long time have a lot of experience, started when the industry was young, it evolved. We have all these great stories of either how you got started, how you screwed up and got fired, or whatever it might be. So pick a topic that you have a lot of stuff with. It could be something that you just want to riff on every week, or every day. I mean, it's up to you, but figure out your format and just go for it, and only commit to doing a handful of episodes. Do 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes to, again, see if you like it. Because if you do those 5 episodes and you get them all done, you realize, that's a bit of work. And it's not that much work, I don't think. But if that's where you're at, then don't do it, because then it's going to be like a chore. You don't want it to be a chore. But if you do it and you dig it as much as I did, and it turns out to be fun and you get a lot of positive feedback, keep rolling. It's great.
That's good advice. And I'm curious, your podcast, has it always been an interview format, or have you just kind of gone on by yourself and just riffed away? Do you bring a guest on and you just riff away? It's not, or actually, I would say it's more like a partner rather than a guest.
Yeah.
And just kind of banter back and forth amongst yourselves.
Yeah, it's always been an interview format. I thought about that a lot when I was starting out, and I really love the Tim Ferriss format. And I really believe in the outdoor industry. What helped me was all the relationships and experiences I had from some of the people that have been in the industry since the beginning. I had good relationships with the founder of Eagle Creek, the founder of Jansport, and those guys started the industry. Some of the folks, the founder of Wilderness Experience. And I worked at a retail shop, one of the old, long-time retail shops in San Diego, Adventure 16. So those folks that had been in the space a long time have a lot to share and a lot that you can learn from them. And so that's what I patterned my show over. That's why I say I think everybody will be better and have a longer, better career if you learn from those that came before you, because they've already made all the mistakes, and you can learn from those mistakes, avoid them sometimes not. But and I think if you learn in the history of whatever it is you're doing, how it got started, why it got started, it just provides a solid foundation for continuing. So that's kind of how I came up with the format. And then it's just been an interview every week. I just, again, 30 years in the industry, I have an unlimited supply of guests to talk to. And fortunately, they've all been super generous. The feedback's been great. So, it's awesome.
You raise another point about the effort to find guests if an interview is going to be your format. And like you, I've never had an issue or a problem finding guests. And maybe it's because we have niched down. I mean, you're in the product space. Mine is more adventure, or
Yeah.
I started to focus more on conservation, stewardship, and access to the outdoors. But I've never had an issue with finding guests, as long as they are someone who has a message and accomplishments behind them.
Yeah.
They're happy to talk about it. But I get these Facebook posts on the platform page of there's folks are just struggling of trying how to find a guest, and then they get sucked into the sign up for this membership program and
Talk to anybody. Yeah.
talk to anybody.
Yeah. You bring up a good point, niching down. The other thing that I tell people is there's a great article written by Kevin Kelly, and I learned about it from Tim Ferriss. Kevin Kelly is the founder of Wired magazine. Wired's one of those technical, it's more not as technical as it was in the early days. It's really very entertaining now. But Kevin Kelly wrote this article called 1,000 True Fans. And if you think about it, you really only need 1,000 person audience to build a pretty good business. Because if you have imagine if you're selling, I don't know, some product or a bunch of different products, and you have 1,000 people that give you $50 every week or every month. I mean, that's pretty good money. You're going to do okay. And so his point of niching down, though, is you don't want to have to talk to everybody, because then you become important to nobody. So if you pick your audience and niche down into an activity you're in, into a hobby you love, a place, maybe you want to learn more about Ireland because you loved it there when you went. Well, but whatever it is, the Eastern Sierra where I live, just niche down, focus on something smaller is better than larger, and run with it. Just let it roll.
Okay. Now, I do want to get to Ireland. I have one last question regarding the how-tos of podcasting, because you have said you had hundreds of potential guests just in the nature of the background you had in product development, sales.
Yep.
How can a small business get value out of this podcast modality?
Well, that's another thing that I've been working hard at getting more and more small outdoor industry businesses to launch their own podcast, because I think in these days it's really hard and sometimes impossible to get your message out with all the noise. I mean, the social media, you run an ad on Facebook, you run ads on LinkedIn, your engagement is much lower than you anticipated. And there's just a lot of things going on out there. But and frankly, there's a lot of podcasts. But if you focus on niching down in that 1,000 True Fans article and really talk about the things that your business does and the value that your business provides and the opportunities, I think a small business can do I know a small business can do very, very well with a podcast. Not that many of them have podcasts yet. And like I said, podcasting is simpler than you think. I mean, it's not that hard to do. And the beauty of a small business, the other thing I think is not only do you have a lot of content opportunities because of all the different stuff that you sell, right? Or the one thing that you sell and the million ways it can be used, whatever that is. But you've also got a staff that can help. Right. I mean, and imagine if you had a weekly podcast or maybe even a monthly podcast, and every other month it was one of your staff members that got to do the episode, got to riff on the product, got to talk about how you go solve plumbing issues for people, whatever it might be. And I think it's just another way to set yourself apart from all the other noise in the world going on these days. And the other thing is, there's nothing like the power of your voice. I said this a million times. The human voice is the most powerful tool we have. It's the first thing that we hear in the womb. We hear our mother's voice, that vibration of her voice. And it's the one thing that's unique to all of us. And it's the one thing that you can amplify. People can tell when they read your article on your blog post or wherever, Facebook or whatever, they don't really get the emotion. But when they hear you talking on a podcast, they can hear your inflection. They can hear your excitement. They can hear your sadness, your frustration, whatever it might be. So I think podcasts are an untapped resource for any small business.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think there's another nuance, and I know you know this already, but I want to share this with our audience, is a lot of folks focus on how many downloads do you have?
Right.
How many views? And it's when you're focusing on the small business to educate them on the value and the power of the podcast, from my perspective, this is where you and I might diverge a bit. I don't think you should even worry about downloads and views. The point is, you're putting the episode up on your website, you're sharing it on your social sites. Your employees, especially if they're involved in creating content, are your brand ambassadors.
Yep.
And it's your customers that you want to hear this message.
Yep.
Because then they're the ones that are going to share it.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think if you try to talk to everybody, you'll end up talking to nobody. And even my podcast, I mean, we all podcasters, it's a double-edged sword for me because I'm a numbers guy and I'm a former athlete. I always wanted to be, I was always the fastest on the team and all these things. Not always, but through my early years till I banged up my knees. But, we're always focused on that. And I do look at downloads. I mean, they're important. But again, back to the Kevin Kelly article, you only need 1,000 of the right people. You don't need 10,000 of the wrong people. And so I think if you niche down, focus, keep your content tight, keep engaging with your audience. I mean, I have a newsletter that goes out to over 5,000 people every week. That's another way to grow and engage with your audience. There's also other things that we won't get into today, but just the podcast is the big 800-pound gorilla. That's the opportunity, but there's other ancillary things that you can do to continue to engage with your audience. But you really don't need that many people. And even if you're, I think of this, I used to live in Alameda, California, and there's a small little hardware store there that it was, you walked in there and it's old school hardware store, stuff everywhere. You want to find everything, you had to kind of go digging and poking around. And that guy probably has all the people that need hardware in Alameda. So whatever the population of Alameda is, he's probably got most of them. That's all he needs. And to start a weekly or even monthly podcast on, hey, we're going to talk about fixing garage doors this week, or we're going to talk about plumbing this week, or whatever it is, that's all you need. Just a small audience, niche down, you'll do much better.
I love it. I love it. Now, let's talk a little bit about Ireland. I mean, I love, by the way, you and I are both members of the Outdoor Writers Association of America. You are an award-winning podcaster.
As are you.
Thank you. I discovered that when I received the certificates for the awards, and they had the press release, it said Howard Fox, award-winning podcast journalist.
Yeah.
And I thought, I never thought of that. That's a differentiator. I'm an award-winning podcast journalist, as are you.
There you go.
And now you and I are
multi-award winning now, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
You are. Yeah. Don't forget about that. It's not just one.
I'm shy. I'll come on.
I am too, but I just want to make sure that the audience realizes that those little things that you do, whether it's acknowledgement from a group that you belong to, acknowledgement from friends, that social proof helps in many, many ways. And you and I are both coaches, so that helps us in our coaching businesses too.
Most definitely that. But I love the fact that you and I are now, or you right now, are focused or have focused on travel with a group of journalists going over to Ireland. So tell us more about that trip. What was that like?
Man, it was an amazing trip. And really, I kind of stumbled into that. It's actually funny how that came about. So it was the last conference that we were at. They have an annual conference. Great. It's a great group, OWAA, Outdoor Writers Association of America. Fantastic people. Ches Chezik is the director there. He's a great guy. I've known him for years from the adventure travel space. And I was walking into that event, that first morning breakfast. And I was walking with Richard Bangs, who's the founder of Sobek. I've known him for years. And he was walking with Ruth, I think her name is, one of the woman that works for Tourism Ireland. Mm-hmm. And Richard introduced me as a podcaster. And he says, again, Rick has the best outdoor biz podcast going. You got to listen to it. Ruth, turns out, is way into podcasting. And she says, we have to get you on this trip we're doing. And I'm like, well, what is that? And I didn't even know about press trips. I'd heard something about these trips where these people get to go and check out all these things, but I didn't really know what they were. And I've been in this space for a long time. But she told me about this press trip where they're taking, I think it was 10 outdoor writers, photographers, journalists, and she said, we need a podcaster. We don't have any podcasters. You'd be great. So I threw my hat in the ring, and turns out I got picked and was one of that 10 folks to go on that trip. And it was a press trip where they took us all around Ireland, and they exposed us to all the great outdoor activities. And then our commitment to them was we'd come back and create content for them, write articles, create podcast episodes, that kind of thing. So it's just a fantastic group. It was a serendipitous way I came about it. Again, it's just that outdoor writers group is just so many people there. You never know where you're going to find an opportunity or through who or when, but it's just a fantastic group. So that was pretty fun.
That is great. And as a podcaster, what were some of the challenges or opportunities that arose while you were there? I mean, anything come about to like, this is new. I hadn't expected that, but this is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I knew it would be different because anytime you're the only one, you know that you're going to have trouble challenges getting your time, right? And the other thing about podcasting is because it is a recorded activity, you need some time to sit down and talk with whoever it is you're talking with. Even if you're just going to riff on something, you're going to have to take time to sit down and riff on the activity. And if I was just riffing and talking about the activity solo, I could have done that every night in the hotel room. But my show is an interview show. And my plan going over there was to interview one of the persons, the guide or whoever it was, on every activity that we went on. And it turned out that that was a little bit challenging because we got to the activity, we did the activity, and then we have a full schedule. So we're off to the next activity. And I felt uncomfortable hanging back and say, okay, you guys got to wait for 45 minutes because I got to go interview Harry. I just didn't want to hold the group up and that kind of thing. So that was a little challenging. And so I ended up I've been thinking about this new concept for my show called the Outdoor Biz Uncut.
Mhm.
Because one of the things that I struggle with is as an outdoor activity related podcast, I never have any episodes outdoors. I rarely do. It's always recorded like we're recording today. You're at home, I'm at home, and we're recording. And so a couple of times I've done some outdoor stuff. I met a buddy of mine who has the adventure travel, the overland business called the Adventure Portal, and he does a bunch of overlanding gear and whatnot. And I met him up in the mountains here in the White Mountains, Grand View Campground, to talk about some product. And I was going to help him get some photography. And the podcast was really early, really new. And I said, hey, let's do an episode up there. So we sat around a picnic table. I had my gear and it started raining. So we had to set up this tarp to keep the gear from getting wet. And you can hear the pitter patter of the rain on the tarp. And it just turned out really cool. And I thought, I got to figure out a way to do more of this. And so, anyway, years go on and the podcast is rolling. And I didn't do many more of those. But last year, I heard somebody do a version of something else. It was something, I think it was a video or a film, but it was uncut. It was just the raw version footage of the activity. And I thought that's it. I could do the Outdoor Biz Uncut. It could be a short little snippet of an episode, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, recorded actually on the activity or after the activity or whatever. So my thought was that's what I would do over there. And the first day we went paddling, we got done paddling and we were waiting for the van to come pick us up. And I had a few minutes. So I grabbed the mic, grabbed the guy that led the trip, Rory Martin from Strangford Lock Activity Center over there, and just sat and talked with him for about 15 minutes, asked him about his business, how he's got into the thing. And it was great. I said, okay, this is perfect. But I only got to do that twice on the activity on the whole trip. So that was the challenge, was trying to figure out how I'm going to catch my content. But I made great connections, and I'll catch them all from over here. But it was awesome. I've actually done one already from over here.
Well, that's fantastic. Now, did you know what your itinerary was going to be before you arrived?
Yeah, so they sent us a list of activities to choose from, and then we all chose what we wanted to do, and then they just sorted out how they were going to split us up into groups because we didn't all pick the same thing, obviously. And they had a big van that we were touring around in, and they would drop the paddling group off and then take somebody else to do the hiking, and then we'd all meet back together. So we did what we were doing each day. Yeah.
Okay. I love the fact that one, you're going over there, and my head is kind of thinking about like, how would I do this? And I love the idea of grabbing somebody willingly and bring them off to the side and just talk a little bit about their work. And I love the uncut version. I think that's fantastic. Beauty too for folks that are listening. The equipment out there, there's some really amazing equipment that is very portable.
Oh yeah.
And so you don't have to, I mean, it's nice to be in a studio and have all the sound tiles and a nice mic and a headset like you and I have. But if we were to take people and go off on remote locations, it's totally doable now.
Totally easy. Yeah. I've done that. Told you about the one I did in the rain. I've done a couple in the wind. The one I did over there with Rory was a perfect afternoon. I mean, it was a beautiful day for paddling, flat water. We just sat there and chatted. And I have two mics. I record with a little Zoom handy recorder. The equipment is really lightweight. I mean, it fit in a small bag. I have another padded bag in my day pack. So
Right.
I always had it. It was easy. And it's all battery powered. And you just make sure you have batteries and away you go. Pretty simple.
Okay. Now the equipment you used, now I know Zoom, it's the equipment for my go-to when I'm heading out. Which device are you using?
I have the H4n little
Okay.
handy recorder. It's a little tiny. It fits in the palm of your hand. You can plug two mics into it. All right, Aaron, I'm messing up your recording.
It's okay. That's what editing is all about. See, folks, this is when you have to think about what's next, because after you do this podcast and you just show up and talk, then you
Yeah,
worry about, okay, how do I edit this stuff? And then
exactly.
that's where the complexity comes in. That's another conversation.
But it's pretty simple. Don't let him scare you. It's pretty simple. If Howard and I could do it, anybody could do it. But
There you go.
yeah, so the Zoom H4n is what I typically record into. And then I've been using ATR 2100 mics, Audio Technica mics.
Mhm.
But the challenge with those outside is they pick up a lot of ancillary noise sometimes.
Right.
So I just got two of the new Samsung Q2U or Q2U or something. And they don't pick up as much of the noise. They pick up directly what you're speaking into the mic. And then the ancillary, the backside of the mic doesn't pick up all the noise. So I use those now outside. They're pretty
Okay.
good. Yeah.
So yeah, I love that, because I mean, I've got the 2100s, I've got some Samsung mics, and I've got the a lavalier mics that fit into
I have some of those too. Yeah.
the Zoom as well. It's got
Yeah.
also has a little, I don't know what they call it, the rabbit's tail that blocks out
Pigtails. Yeah. Yeah.
that blocks out the noise. But so it sounds like it was overall good, definitely a learning experience for you. You created a new opportunity. You are starting to percolate a new opportunity, which is to do more outside, uncut type segments.
Yeah.
Now you're going to begin to kind of interview the rest of the folks that you had met over there, and those are going to become full episodes.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do 4 episodes. I've already done actually two uncut. So the other uncut version was one of the afternoons. I was on a hike. There was a trail we were doing, and a bunch of people biked, and I didn't know that there were e-bikes. Otherwise, I might have biked as well. But I did a hike. I hiked that trail with a woman. We had a nice long walk and talking about just. I'm a new media guy, so all this media stuff is just like drinking from a fire hose for me. I've been a sales guy and a marketing guy and a product guy all my life. So when I got into podcasting, I didn't really realize the media side of it. So that's been the great and opportunity for me with OWAA, just all to get to connect with the media folks. So over there, this was my first press trip. I knew that people did these, but I'd never been on one. Even as a photographer, I didn't get to go on very many. But so I was learning about all that, and we were on this hike, and we got back to the hotel. We sit down at lunch, and turns out that I forget which activity I was going to do that afternoon, but it was getting canceled, and there was an opportunity to go fishing. And I thought, and I didn't see fishing early when I chose my activities, and I thought, oh, that'd be great. So quick had to go through my lunch, jumped in the car, and drive to this. We had about a 45-minute drive to go to this lock where we were going to fish. And I said to the guy that was driving us over there was from Fisheries Ireland. He kind of managed a lot of the fishing stuff in Ireland. So I said, hey, do you mind if we hop on a podcast and do a quick interview right now? And he said, no, let's do it. So I got to talk with him for about 30 minutes in the car about all the fishing in Ireland and trout fishing. And that's going to be another good one. That'll be the second uncut one that I do. And then I think I want to have him on the show as a regular episode. And then I also recorded a regular episode. One of the activities was climbing. So they didn't do a lot of climbing, but they did it. They set up Tyrolean traverses on these huge rocks that were right along the water. It was really cool. And I was hiking again that day, but I grabbed the guy afterwards as we were all leaving. And I said, hey, I want to have you on my podcast. So we connected about a week ago, and I interviewed him about his business over there, just taking people hiking and climbing and all these things. So yeah, you just kind of catch as catch can. And what I learned on the press trip was, for a podcaster anyway, it's probably, again, it's going to be catch as catch can, because you got to snag people when you can. And if you get an opportunity to stay a little later and do a full-blown episode, because my episodes, I don't have any limit on my episodes. So if I sat there and talked for an hour and held up the whole group, that would be a little challenging. But maybe if I reached out to the person and said, hey, can you meet us at the hotel? We're staying here and we could do it there, do that. But we were, again, on the go. We would finish the activity, hop in the van, and drive for a couple hours to the next place where we were going to stay the night for the next activity in the morning. So it was kind of a challenge, but I made it happen.
Sounds like a great opportunity. And I want to give you or share my ask right now because I have a lot of asks when I do my
Well, before you
podcast.
do that, I want to just give props to the Tourism Ireland people and the OWA folks and the journalists that we were on and all the activities we participated in. Everybody was great. Everybody was hospitable and fun, and the activities were amazing. So I caught my first brown trout in Ireland. I'm not my first brown trout, but the first brown trout in Ireland, obviously. So just everything was just a blast. So thank you guys
That's
very much.
very good, very good. And we're going to provide the backlinks to
Cool.
Tourism Ireland and Stellar. They have the
Oh, I keep
app.
forgetting Stellar. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Richard. I keep forgetting Stellar. Yeah.
Well, we'll have that. And any other links that you'd like us to share related to the trip, happy to do that in show notes. I would like a couple things. One is the list of the equipment that you used while you were over there. This idea of taking it portable,
Yeah,
I think would be great to share that in the show notes.
absolutely.
Also, if there's any photos, obviously you're working, but if there's photos of you in action, even at the pub drinking a Guinness, that's fine. Totally cool with
I'll have
that.
to ask somebody. I don't have one of myself, but I'll have to see if there is one yet. It's funny. I'll bet I took less than 20 photos over there. When I had
Really?
my phone, probably more than that. I didn't take my camera gear because had the podcast gear. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's actually important to know that now I think about that. But so was there an aha moment coming off of this adventure for you?
Yeah, a couple of them. One, again, I think it's the opportunity that podcasts provide for not only the folks, the activity operators, that we met with, but for people like Tourism Ireland or Tourism New Mexico or wherever it might be. I mean, you guys have great activities, whether it's all the great restaurants, it's all the great outdoor activities, it's all the great artwork that goes on in your town. Whatever the thing is, you can have a podcast or share that with the world. And there's so many podcasters out there now that focus on whether it's my outdoor adventure biz podcast or your podcast on outdoor adventure. There's foodie podcasts, there's all kinds of stuff. So that's another new avenue. And again, it's the human voice. You can share the story, the operator can share the story, the podcaster will drag the story out of you. There's a bunch of ways to get that to happen. So don't forget podcasting.
Very good. Very good. Hey, before we head out, I'd love if you could share any final, perhaps more encompassing aha moment that you have had again, you're a career changer, which by the way, you could have been on my career focus series on Success Insight to talk about what happens when you're 50 and get laid off. Because you and I have reinvented ourselves. And so great conversation, but thinking about this work that you're doing now in podcasting and where it's beginning to take you and really the opportunities that have come up because of it, what's been your biggest aha moment as a podcaster?
I think for me, it's been how simple it is to pull it off. I mean, I really encourage people, don't get hung up on the tech side of it because it's easier now than it was when I started. And it was easy then. I mean, I really think that the producing, the publishing, there's even when I did it, there weren't that many places that you could send your files to and have the episode produced. Now all you have to do is record the content, send it off, and somebody will turn it into an episode for you. So unless you really dig it, which I do, I enjoy all the process. So don't let that scare you off as far as creating a podcast. And then for all you folks out there that run small businesses, you don't have to have your own podcast. I mean, podcasting is only growing. Listenership is only growing. If you go look at the numbers from Libsyn or the numbers from Edison Research, listenership is way up. It's interesting that the podcast numbers fell a little bit. The new podcast fell a little bit last year, but the listenership is way up. You can find a podcast these days on anything and everything. So you don't have to start your own show. You can be a guest on shows, multiple shows, like I'm a guest on Howard's show today, or you can sponsor a podcast. We all have That's one of the ways that podcasts monetize is through sponsorship and advertising. So I have these mid-roll ad reads that I do, and a lot of them are affiliates. A lot of them are for people I know, but they're paid. I get paid to do that. I charge you for exposure to my audience. But that's another way in this crazy world these days of getting your business out in front of folks. And again, the power of your voice. You can record the ad. You can record the ad with the podcaster or have the podcaster record the ad. So don't Don't miss out on the opportunity that podcasting prevents to get your message out, and you don't need a podcast to do that.
I love it. Great, great insights. Now, Rick, before we head out, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
Yeah, you can go to ricksaez.com. Saez is Saez. And then on that site, there's 4 links. One is look, that's my photography. One is listen, that's the podcast. One is learn, that's the podcast coaching program I do through my podcasters workshop. And I'm forgetting what the other one is, but that's where all my stuff lives. You can find me on all the socials at Rick Saez on Twitter, or at Rick_Saez on Twitter, Outdoor Biz Pod on Instagram. I'm all over Facebook, LinkedIn, all the places.
Sounds like a plan. Well, we'll provide all those backlinks to the website and to your social sites as well. Rick, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, and
Always, Howard. Thanks.
Fantastic, and thanks again for sharing more again about your background, going a little deeper. And I really very envious about this trip to Ireland. I'm thinking,
well, you're going on the next one.
I hope so. I hope so. But it just sounds like a great adventure, and really looking forward to listening to those episodes, especially the uncut versions, which I like to do as well. I mean, this part of this episode will show up on YouTube as a video. So there's a lot of creative ways we could do this work. And really, it's been a pleasure to get to know you and to learn from you as well. And really excited to what we perhaps might even do in the future together. So thank you again.
Yeah. Thank you, Howard. I appreciate it.
All right. Stay on the line. We're going to do a quick close and we can have a final chat.
Sounds
All
good.
right, folks. We have just been chatting with Rick Saez. He is an adventurer, probably almost his entire life. Grew up outdoors with family. He's been an author. He's an accomplished photographer, great work, as well as a podcaster. And do check out the links we're going to share to his website and to the podcast site and the Outdoor Biz Podcast. If you're into the product space and outdoors, this is the show you want to listen to, and we'll provide the backlinks to that as well as the websites and social sites. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day. Take care of yourselves, your family, get out and explore. And we will see you on a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Before I forget, you should check us out on the Outdoor Adventure Series .com. That's our website. I knew I was forgetting something, Rick. And I'm going to keep that in. I'm not even going to edit that out.
You're like me. I'm not a self-promotion guy at all. It's hard for me to do, but you got to do it.
Got to do it. And so, folks, OutdoorAdventureSeries.com. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn on the Outdoor Adventure Series. And you can find this episode and all of our other Outdoor Adventure Series episodes wherever you get your podcasts from. And we're also on YouTube, where there's going to be a nice video segment of this episode with Rick. So I think that's it. So go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you in a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.